welcome. You're watching France 24 and this is Eye on Africa, our top stories. After finally returning home, the remains of South African freedom fighters who died in exile are honored in an official ceremony. More than 4 million people across West and Central Africa are grappling with the effects of unprecedented flooding. We'll talk to an NGO's director in Nigeria, where Borno State's capital was devastated. And devastation as well in southern Niger. We'll go to Zimbabwe, where the iconic mosque in the Sultanate district collapsed after months of heavy rains. Its guardians warn about the urgent need to protect the old city's heritage. "42 South African freedom fighters were honored by the South African government in an official ceremony. Their bodies were repatriated from Zimbabwe and Zambia, where they died decades ago. Their return is part of a government program to bring closure to families whose loved ones died away from home while fighting apartheid. Over 1,000 anti-apartheid activists have died in exile. Clémence Valère has the story.
They died in exile, fighting for their freedoms and against apartheid. Now their remains are finally back on home soil, returned to their loved ones. On Friday, the bodies of 42 South African freedom fighters repatriated from Zimbabwe and Zambia were laid in state.
Decades ago, these freedom fighters left a country that was at war with itself. They left a country in which the fundamental rights of its people were brutally and cruelly suppressed by a system of apartheid.
Before the end of apartheid in 1994, many activists had to leave South Africa, some to undergo military training with the aim of leading an armed struggle, and others to flee the repression and violence of the white minority's segregationist regime.
As a family, we're very happy our father has returned home. We needed this a lot over the years, and we tried different ways to get him back.
Among the bodies repatriated on Wednesday were those of fighters Duma Nokwe, Florence Moposho and Basil February, with plans underway to bring more back from Ethiopia, Lesotho, Tanzania or even Russia. While families are relieved to have their loved ones back, many have mixed feelings, deeming this should have happened years ago.
It would have been great if this could have happened when my mother was alive. She mourned from the day when Basil died, when we received the news so brutally from the security branches in those years, who said that we are just here to tell you that we have killed your pig.
The bodies will be handed back to the families for a private burial and a final goodbye.
Nigeria is still reeling from devastating floods. Borno State capital Maiduguri was badly hit after the Alau Dam overflowed. Thousands of people were displaced, entire neighborhoods submerged, and critical infrastructure destroyed. Nearly 2 weeks later, the humanitarian needs remain overwhelming, like at this teachers' village camp for internally displaced persons.
Hundreds queue for food at the internally displaced camp in the city of Maiduguri. They have nowhere to go after floods washed away their homes and all their belongings. Isa Musa is one of the thousands of refugees who depend on the relief effort provided at the teachers' village camp. However, he and others say they received distressing news.
The government is saying that once we receive the food parcels, we will have to leave the camp and return to our homes.
The waters have receded from Isa's home. However, only mud and rubble remain. He is anxiously waiting for the government agents to come assess the damage to his house. The evaluation will determine the level of state aid his household will receive.
Everything has collapsed. Apart from this place, we have nowhere to stay. They said they would send people to assess the level of damage in each house. They visited some places and checked, but no one has come to our area yet.
In a recent press conference, a Borno state representative addressed concerns about camp closures. He stressed the government announced a voluntary return home for those with a safe place, while others could continue to stay until further notice. However, he added that a phased closure of the camps would happen soon to allow academic activities to return to normal.
And we are now joined by Ndubisi Emeka Anyon, who is the NGO Mercy Corps country director in Nigeria, and he joins us live from Abuja. Ndubisi Emeka Anyon, thank you very much for being with us. So what is the current situation in Maiduguri?
Thank you for having me. Maybe just to start out with a bit of context, in terms of the situation in Maiduguri, the Borno state government has estimated that about 400,000 people have been displaced by these floods. The governor himself did mention that this was one of the most acute disasters that the state has experienced. I believe the last time they had this situation was about 30 years ago in 1994. I had a personal experience to visit Maiduguri with an interagency group led by the UN. We visited on the 14th of September. We visited some of the camps that were set up for the flood, and it was just for me to just explain it. Even in the context of the sanitary conditions, it was really very poor in terms of the sanitary conditions. We saw a situation where you have about 70 toilets for about 20,000 people. There are about 300,000 people living in 26 camps in Maiduguri, and the numbers, they continue to grow. When we look at some of the needs, there are a couple of needs that we can see. One is, of course, the need for food assistance. We're also seeing the needs for non-food items as well. And of course, just the wash and sanitary conditions that, and so for us at the Mercy Corps, these are the areas that we are supporting in with the support of the US government. We're doing food assistance. We're also doing assistance when it comes to multi-purpose cash to individuals.
So the floodings have been affecting as well millions of other people across West and Central Africa. So how do you work along the authorities to build long-term resilience against future, what we call climate shocks?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for this kind of situation, obviously the government is doing the best that they can, with the agencies, and we're here to support government. Government cannot do it all, and that's where the issues around partnerships come up. And so you need government, you need the private sector, you need the NGOs and the UN to support, and other development partners to come together to resolve this situation. And we have to look at sustainable solutions. We have to look at how we can promote climate smart agriculture. We need to be able to diversify livelihoods. We need to strengthen early warning systems to prepare to respond to climate crises like this in the future. And so, we have to look at what's happening across the Sahel, and not just northern Nigeria. We're prone to issues of climate change, where you have erratic rainfall and droughts, as well as flooding. So it's something that, the private sector, government, and the development partners have to come together to resolve.
And what do you think, and quickly, if you may, I mentioned climate change when Africa is actually, especially that region, is the least emitting part of the world, emitting carbon emission?
Yeah, I think, we're seeing the impact of increasingly severe floods, which have devastated communities, has destroyed livelihoods and led to loss of lives. And, we have to ensure that, we're able to build resilience. Africa does not contribute much to climate change, but is suffering the losses. So I think this is really a clarion call to bring assistance, to increase funding when it comes to issues of climate change, particularly in places that are prone to the climate situation, like in Africa, in West Africa, in East Africa. There needs to be more support, more funding to resolve the climate situation.
Nubisi Emeka Anyanwu from the Mercy Corps, thank you very much for your analysis. And talking about climate change in neighboring country Niger, the iconic mosque in the Sultanate district of Zinder collapsed after months of heavy rains. The mosque was Niger's second most visited after Agadez. And today, the Sultan's men, the guardians of both faith and the palace, warn about the urgent need to protect the old city's heritage.
When Zinder's over 200-year-old mosque crumbled, the whole country mourned the mud brick structure. A relentless rainy season had shattered all the efforts of one man, Mansour Ayuba, the muezzin of the mosque. The one who calls Muslims to prayer each day also warned them of the building's weaknesses. Now, all he can do is witness the damage.
There were early signs before the collapse. The northern side had started to crack, and the Sultan had called for repairs. However, with the heavy rains recently, the roof of the mosque became heavier, and it eventually gave in. With God's help, we can either repair the mosque or rebuild it. We hope that people of goodwill will step up so that it can be restored, as this is our first mosque and part of Damagaram's history.
In the historic district of Bieni, members of the Sultan's court inspect ancient buildings. Mansour Ayuba knows this area like the back of his hand.
These houses are part of our heritage. They were passed down to us by our ancestors. It's up to those of us living now to take care of them so that future generations may inherit them as well.
Protecting this heritage are the traditional guards of the Sultan's palace, all dressed in red. They're always on the lookout for craftsmen with traditional skills to preserve ancient buildings still standing.
These works were crafted long ago, in an era when people were believed to lack technical knowledge. But even today, many would find it difficult to recreate them, so protecting this heritage is crucial.
Climate change is now the biggest threat to Niger's cultural heritage. Year after year, heavier rains damage historic sites that have stood for centuries.
It was Zimbabwe's fifth attempt at having a currency of its own in 15 years. But just 5 months after its introduction, the Zimbabwe gold is losing considerable value against the US dollar, leaving authorities battling to save the struggling currency. When it was introduced, you needed about 13 zig to get $1, but now it's double the amount on the black market. Nyasha Jingono.
It reads like an all-too-familiar story for most Zimbabweans who feel the zig will end up like its previous currencies. The zig has failed to take off on the market due to increased US dollar demand as government imports more grain to save millions from hunger. At this bustling informal business center in central Harare, second-hand clothing traders prefer the US dollar. They want to cushion themselves from inflation.
The US dollar is the currency that's widely used here. We also take zig, but it's short in supply. Since it was introduced, I've yet to hold a 100 zig note.
Pritim Tumani makes a living from selling used clothes, but says that life is becoming tougher daily.
We are suffering in Zimbabwe. When we come here to sell second-hand clothes, council police are always on our backs demanding the little we have. President Mnangagwa should help us vendors so that we can earn a living.
While government has been battling to restore sanity to the exchange rate, economists say it would take time to restore confidence in the local currency.
Well, the issue of a currency is a function of a number of factors, but ultimately it's all about trust and confidence. But trust and confidence is influenced by, number one, inflation. So Zimbabwe, we've had a number of episodes of chronic high inflation and hyperinflation. So obviously that has eroded people, economic agents' trust and confidence in the local currency.
Authorities have tried to reassure Zimbabweans and say that this is still too early to write off the zig as the failed currency.
And we leave you, but not before wishing a very happy birthday to South African Margaret Maritz. She was born on this day, but in 1906. That makes her 118 years young. She might be the oldest person in the world, and as you can see, she celebrated with a small party at her care home in Taos River. Unfortunately, she didn't share the secrets of her longevity. And with that concludes our edition of Eye on Africa. Thank you for watching.